I really need to actually. I seriously not actually need to do something that I thought I needed to do? If this works, that'll genuinely save me so much time. God, it does. Oh my gosh, that actually saved me so much time. Oh, that's perfect. Noise, personalizing, don't really feel like doing too much. So we'll just look that. And yeah, I'll say hello, Jay. I don't know if I actually like this or not. No. But hello, Jay. I hope you are doing well. I hope you had good strength. I hope it was well. I am sorry though for not. I kind of semi died out a little bit. But I hope it was well otherwise. I did want to edit this deck a bit before I actually start doing stuff though. And it was... Okay, I want to keep these. If we get rid of all of those... Actually, no. We do need these. It's the Iridus. I mean, the Candaces I was thinking of getting rid of. So bring in Iridus. And actually, you know what? J34. We'll get rid of those and we'll actually keep Candace and see how that works. I'm hoping that'll work out semi-decent slash good. Also, let me just pull this up quick. Please don't play mad. Oh, you're just not going to play anything new. Okay. Here I'm trying to pull up a podcast real quick. So that. Here we go. Season 9. There. Perfect. Oh, so I don't like this already. Oh, you. this be an interesting thing? You didn't need to. Okay. Okay, you can't attack on your first turn, can you? I should have probably just done charisma. Could have done charisma and that. Well, after that, energy would just been back into his hand, anyways. So I don't know why that stopped. Hopefully that's not too quiet or loud. I could just do this rapid freeze, even though that did absolutely jack.
It's the No Sleep Podcast. I'm David Cummings.
What is this?
On this week's show, we have 6 tales about medical malfeasance, absent adolescence, and wary woodlands.
Can I please stop getting Giovanni's charisma? And yeah.
It's hard to believe we've come this far. In a couple of months, we'll be celebrating our 6th anniversary. And when I look back to see how far the podcast has come, it simply staggers my shriveled little brain. Over 225 episodes, likely over 400 hours of audio horror storytelling, and so many great collaborators. I simply cannot be more grateful for the cast and crew who have joined me over the years to get us where we are today. Their involvement keeps making the show better and better. I'm so proud to be a part of the audio horror podcast community. And speaking of which, I want to mention a new podcast you will certainly enjoy. It's from John Grills, the creator of the great Small Town Horror podcast. His new show is called Creepy, and it features audio adaptations of popular creepypasta stories like Russian Sleep Experiment and Ted the Caver. The easiest way to find it is go to twitter.com/creepypod.
This is not how I wanted my first game to go, I'm gonna be honest. I'm just not getting the right hands.
We have a story he wrote on this week's show. Great to have you back, John. And so here we are, season 9. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to express my overwhelming gratitude and love for our listeners. Some of you are season pass members, and we can't.
This is literally doing absolutely nothing for me.
But to everyone who listens, you mean the world to us. It's not about whether or not you pay us for what we do. What matters to us is that you listen to our episodes and hopefully enjoy what we produce. We are, at heart, artists and creators. Without people to hear the fruit of our labor, it would all be meaningless. We love that you're out there, spanning this planet, listening to our work each week. So to all of you who listen and make this worthwhile, we value you more than you can know.
I feel like I might as well just concede, because I don't believe there's any way I can actually win, but I'm still gonna try anyways. Especially when I just do stuff like that. Like I get nothing.
I'm oft heard saying, brace yourself, because it's time for this week's show. In our first tale, we meet a woman who is documenting the strange happenings in her small Minnesota town. As we learn from author Rona Vassilar, an escalating series of illnesses and deaths prompts her to realize that her town is
Yeah, retreat. Probably bring up the Reggie let there.
anyone is letting on. performing this
So
tale
I bring up
is
the
just a
Regielect
production
IV Max
so
and
let's discover the horrific results of
then just
containment.
attack and kill. Oh, sweet. That helps me not at all.
Although it's unlikely I'll be able to remain anonymous, I'll be operating under an alias for the moment. In the course of these events, I'll refer to myself as Nenem. It's nonsense. Nothing that can be connected to me. I live in a small, rural town in southern Minnesota. We have a population of about 5,000 people.
They could
The
win.
town
They
is
can
about
win this
5
next
square
round,
miles,
in a sense.
located on a prairie and surrounded by farmland. To the west of the town is a lake, about half a mile in diameter. I will code
Because they
name the
could
town
bring up
Little
that.
Creek
They could have
to
brought up
avoid
that
detection.
and
It probably
done
won't
good,
matter
but
anyway.
guess not.
I'm sure all online traces of it will have disappeared within the next few hours. I have lived in Little Creek for 23 years, excluding my
These
time
back
at college.
in, even though it won't
I
matter.
recently returned in order to take care of my mother,
And
who has been
enter.
sick. I have never noticed anything
So
strange
what's
here.
going on? But
It's
enter.
always been the definition of quiet country living. These developments happened quickly, and somebody needs to know about them before they continue. I have cataloged them here. I hope to God somebody sees this and understands. April 12th, 2017. I returned to Little Creek around 4 in the afternoon. There was road work being done on the interstate.
You
as I
could
headed
lightning
into town.
rodeo, I
Not unusual.
think,
There were also
twice,
what appeared to
and
be
then just
construction
bring up
workers near the lake
Iron
to the west of
Hands
town.
and
They were hauling in
just do a
heavy-duty
funny.
equipment or something. Once I arrived home, I asked my mother about it. She didn't know why they were there. I settled in and moved my things back into my old room. April 13th, 2017.
That's it.
I woke up at 6 a.m. My internet was down. I headed to the grocery store at 6:30, where I confirmed with other shoppers that they were experiencing internet problems as well. This is not uncommon where I live. Being out in such a rural area, there's only one internet service provider. At the store, I ran into a local man I'll refer to as Ben. Ben is known throughout the town for his paranoid delusions. Many people believe he suffers from some kind of mental disorder, perhaps schizophrenia. He and I had a short interaction in which he claimed that the construction workers at the lake were government officials sent to destroy the evidence of illegal
It's
conduct
definitely game.
extending back to the 1960s.
Well, I'm kind of surprised they didn't use the Iron Hands.
Increasingly distressed.
I mean, I guess there was
he
no
left the
point,
store,
but
and
at the same
I made my
time,
purchases and returned home. By noon, my internet was working again. I searched our local news site for more information about the work being conducted at the lake. I found nothing. April 14th,
why?
2017. At 8 a.m., I took my mother to the doctor. While in the hospital waiting room, I encountered various local persons I was familiar with. I asked them about the work being done at the lake. None of them knew what work was being done, but they all expressed a desire to know. At 2 p.m., I drove down to the lake. I parked my car on the side of the road and approached a group of construction workers to ask about their work. I was stopped by a police officer. He wasn't a Little Creek police officer, and he wasn't a state trooper. He informed me that I was trespassing, and that it was too dangerous for me to
Resuscitus
approach the site.
Vitality,
He escorted me to
Reversal
my car,
Springtail,
would not
Reversal
answer any questions
Tinkerton,
regarding the lake.
and Frost Loss.
April 15th,
Summary,
2017. 1
Absol,
p.m. I had another
Mystery.
interaction with Ben. He came to my
Reverse
mother's house.
Ultimate, reverse Techno Radar,
She handed me several documents, asked me to read through them,
Knowledge, Blood Soul,
answer any questions,
Professor Side of
and only stayed
Vitality,
for about 5
Autocordio,
minutes.
Reversalo,
I have been
Reversalo
unable to scan the
Eloquid,
documents
and
upload
what was
them
that
to my
called?
computer. Instead, I have transcribed them.
Put two
He handed
Pokemon
me
EX
3
into
printed
play,
newspaper
with
articles
Pokemon.
and 1 handwritten note.
Play one sport,
Article
I knew
1.
that.
Local boy dies under mysterious circumstances. June 16th, 1972. Daniel Thompson, child of Seamus and Elizabeth Thompson, died last week from an unfortunate and undiagnosed sickness. Daniel, aged 10, was admitted to the hospital after a period of severe nausea and vomiting. Over the course of the next few hours, Daniel suffered from faintness, dizziness, abdominal pain, and an erratic pulse. He died during the night from heart failure. Daniel is survived by his parents, as well as his older brother, Ben, and his younger sister, Christine. The cause of Daniel's sickness is as yet unknown. Anyone with information pertaining to this illness is encouraged to come forward. At the bottom of this article, Ben had written in red ink, "Swimming at the lake," and circled it. Article 2. Death of 16-year-old linked to Little Creek Lake. August 4th, 1978. 16-year-old Stephanie Wilson was found dead near Little Creek Lake 2 weeks ago by a local farmer. The cause of Stephanie's death is as yet unknown. However, locals claim that it may have had something to do with the lake where she had been swimming prior to her death.
This pretty card. I want an arrow.
Said Timothy Lysette.
It's one of the cards I really want to pull because of how pretty it looks like in my opinion.
There don't come out right. Several locals expressed their agreement, but declined to be interviewed for official comment. An autopsy is pending to determine the cause of death for the young woman. Any information pertaining to her death should be brought to the police as soon as possible. There were no
I should have waited
Article 3.
to do this.
Local child is granted wish. September 20th, 2003.
Because I could have used Radiant Greninja's ability.
Alex Tonnery was granted his lifelong wish to be the sheriff of the Little Creek Police Department. It's our honor to have such a good officer join us for the day, said Officer Brandy, as she showed Alex her cruiser and gave him an in-depth tour of all its features. Alex, diagnosed last year with leukemia, has been given 6 weeks to live. However, his headstrong and positive spirit has shown through even during these tough times. I'll be sad to leave Mommy and Daddy, but I know I'll get to see them again someday, Alex told us. He was provided with a police uniform in miniature, as well as his own badge. His parents looked on in the distance, taking pictures to commemorate the occasion. We just want these last weeks to be happy, Jennifer Tonnery said, as she watched her son become the new star of the police department. As long as he's happy, we know The page cut off here. In the bottom, written in red ink, Tonnery Farms lived half a mile from the lake. Included with the articles was this handwritten note. Nenem, you're the only person we can trust with
I
this.
put the wrong one in.
You have to act quickly because there isn't much time. I know you went to the lake the other day. You must already know what's unintelligible. In the 1960s,
I put the wrong
this site was used for
card in.
government testing.
That's not good.
I told you the other day. They made a mistake. They're back to try to clean it up before anyone finds out. It's only a matter of time before someone unintelligible. They are trying to block any and all information relating to the accident. They know that I know. I don't have much time either. We're all being watched. You especially.
So we do this
Find
and
a way
this.
to stop them. The note was left
Take
on the
one.
side.
And then we do
April
that.
16th, 2017. At noon, I went to look for Ben.
And we do it.
He was not at his house. Nobody knew where he'd been. I did not look further. I didn't want to raise any suspicion. I assumed Ben was crazy, but I was also paranoid about what was being done down at the lake. April 17th, 2017. At 8 a.m., I was awoken by a scream from outside
I just
the
can't
house.
get away from how pretty this
Upon
card
reaching
is.
the window, I saw a child laying outside on the sidewalk. She was covered in vomit. Her skin
That
was
there,
red,
do
as though
200.
severely sunburnt. Her mother was on her knees, screaming beside her. Before I was able to get my bearings and move towards the door, the mother stopped screaming and began convulsing. She began to vomit as well, her fingers clawing at her throat. After she vomited twice, she fainted next to her child. My mother had come down the stairs at that point. She attempted to leave the house to help the woman and her child, but I held her back. Outside, a man stopped his car and left the vehicle to help the woman and child. He was on his phone, I believe attempting to call for help, when he collapsed on the sidewalk, bringing his hand to his head as though it was in great pain. His skin also began to grow red. I pulled my mother away from the window and sat her down in the living room. I checked to make sure all the doors and windows in the house were sealed. We appeared to be safe in the house. I guessed that people had become sick because they stepped outside, leading me to believe that the virus, or whatever it was airborne. I attempted to use the landline to call the hospital, but the phone was out. I then used my cell phone. The hospital line was busy, as was the police line. I turned on the television, but none of the local stations were coming in. I was able to get stations from outside the county, which meant that whatever was happening was local. I decided the best course of action was to try to get my mother and myself out of the town. The garage door was closed, so I assumed it was reasonably safe for us to get to the car. I turned off the air vents and locked the doors. We attempted to leave on the interstate. We weren't the only ones. Several other town members were heading south on the interstate. However, there was a roadblock set up just 2 miles outside of town. It was being manned by several people in hazmat suits. This confirmed my fear that the pathogen was airborne. They were holding guns. I am not certain what kind. They shot the windshield of the first car. I can't be sure, but I believe they killed the driver. The female passenger exited the car, screaming. They shot her as well. At this point, I turned the car around and went back the way we came. Several other cars followed suit. The men continued to shoot at the retreating cars. I didn't look back to see if they killed anyone else. I saw 2 cars get into an accident in their attempts to flee. The drivers stumbled out of the wrecked cars and immediately began vomiting on the side of the road. They tried to flag me down to help
This.
them. I kept
And
driving.
bring out that.
We tried the other direction.
Wish for a water
I saw
button.
the roadblock before
I
we
can
got
take
close
a
enough to be
VMAX,
shot.
VMAX and
Retreated back
Superior
into
Energy Retrieval.
By the time we returned to the
Get rid of
house,
2
the
cards.
streets were littered with
Grab
bodies.
all of those
I
and
had to drive over some of
should
them
be fine.
home.
I won't win
Many of
this, I know
them
that
had
much for
strange
sure, but...
burns covering their skin.
Oh, I don't even need to.
Most were covered in vomit.
Okay, we do that.
Many were still alive, but it was clear they would not live for very long. We
We'll
returned
still
to the
do this to
garage and
take
shut the door.
this
I
and
instructed my mother to cover her mouth and close her eyes.
this.
I got her into the house as soon as I
We
could.
do that.
Neither of us showed any symptoms of
We
whatever was
do
happening outside.
this.
I instructed my mother to lie down in her room. Once she
We
had
do
calmed
this.
down and was resting, I began to gather supplies.
Take
I
those.
realized that our most direct method of escape, the interstate, was not a viable option. We would need to reassess before we tried anything else.
Super cold.
I figured that as long as we were in the house and the vents were closed, which I double-checked as soon as we got home, we would be safe. Once I gathered all the supplies I
Visual
thought
world.
might be useful, I went
These-
online to
yes.
do some research.
Perfect.
The time was approximately 10 a.m. I began by trying to research the symptoms I'd observed in the people laying outside.
Okay, so
People who'd been
1,
contaminated.
2, 220
Most effects that came
knocks
up on
that
people
out.
were related to acute radiation syndrome. When I
Take
attempted
this.
to access the sites related to radiation,
Superior energy
poisoning, however,
retrieval.
they were blocked. This was consistent across
2.
4 or 5 sites.
Should be
Eventually, I turned off
fine
the
if I take
VPN
them.
and was able to access the sites. Not only did the symptoms match those of radiation poisoning, but the majority of the sites also mentioned nuclear fallout and nuclear testing sites as closely linked to
1, 2,
instances of
3,
radiation poisoning. Over the
30
next
for
several
each. So
hours,
3, 6, 9,
until about noon,
10,
I did as
12,
much research into
15.
nuclear testing as I could. At 12:30, I went to check on my mother. When I entered her room, she was crouched over a garbage can. She had vomited several times. The skin on her face was red. At this time, I also began to notice that I was experiencing a headache. I believe we both have been contaminated. My mother was already very ill. Her body was not able to withstand the radiation poisoning. She is no longer conscious and will die in a few hours. At 2 o'clock, I will be leaving. I'm going to risk getting into my car and increasing my exposure to the radiation. I believe that if I can get to a hospital in another town, I may be able to survive this. But I have to act quickly. There are dozens of tiny country roads leading out of this town. If I am careful, I may be able to find one that the government overlooked. Before I leave, I'm detailing what I've learned here, what I think I know about Little Creek, Minnesota. In my research, I stumbled upon something called underground nuclear testing. It's the only
Did I
testing currently
use?
permitted under the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Essentially, nuclear weapons can be tested by detonating them below the surface. If they are detonated far enough below ground, they will be completely contained in the Earth's surface, and
Just
no
120
nuclear
is fine.
fallout
That's
will
all I
spread
need.
into the atmosphere. Any harmful gases can be extracted and neutralized through controlled tunnel purging. But if the explosion is too close to the surface, it will cause a crater. This is known as containment failure. Radiation from the blast can escape into the atmosphere all at one time, or at small increments over many years. A crater would be an obvious landmark. It would raise questions. But a lake? In the land of 10,000
And that's all my energy fix. I
nobody would
am
bat an eye
screwed.
at that. And nobody out here would notice the difference between a natural lake and a crater the
7.
government had filled with water. That's why the government sent workers to Little Creek Lake. The radiation and hazardous gases were seeping from the lake and infecting the townspeople. The government was hoping
Yeah,
to use
no.
a controlled tunnel purge to neutralize the gas and radiation. But something went wrong. Something went terribly, horribly wrong. Now, they're trying to cover it up. They're going to take Little Creek off the map. All the inhabitants with it. Judging by the number of bodies outside, a number that is constantly growing, they've killed off about 90% of the town's inhabitants. But they haven't got me yet. I'm leaving. I don't know how much time before I succumb to the radiation poisoning anyway.
Hmm.
I might as well try to escape while I have the chance. If I can't, maybe they'll at least shoot me. I'm not stupid. I know I'm not likely to survive the next few hours, let alone the next few days. I'm going to try anyway.
I'm confused why they did that. Why would you... I don't know. I'm so confused.
Whether young or old, most people fondly recall the joys of hearing the playful truck drive down their street to sell them frozen treats. But in this tale from author Jacob Healy, we learn of one town where such things no longer occur and why they never will
GG's.
again. Performing this tale are Mike Delgadio, Nicole Doolin, Eden, and Corinne Sanders. So let's find out the significance of why, as the locals tell us, our town was visited by an ice cream truck.
Our town doesn't get many visitors. The roads leading through it don't come from anywhere important, and they don't go nowhere important either. Hell, I don't think we rate a drop of ink on most maps of the area. You never heard of it, I'm almost sure. But for 96 people on this planet, Bertrand, Montana, well, it's home. I once heard a rumor that Bertrand is the oldest city in America. Now, I don't mean we've been around the longest, of course, but if you add up the ages of all of our citizens and divide that number by the number of citizens we have, well, let's just say you'd be hard-pressed to find another town in the homeland where the average age is 73 years old, and counting. There are no children here, and there likely never will be again, not in Bertrand. The youngest among us, Tommy Bellwether, he's 62. When it happened, young Tommy was 13 years old, short for his age, and the most insolent little bastard you ever laid eyes on. Now he runs the laundromat in town, always armed with a bright smile, a kind word, and a Colt 45. Don't ask me why he's stuck around, because I don't know. I'm not sure why any of us have. After everything that's happened, everything we went through, you might think we couldn't get out of here fast enough. Oh, some of us did, of course. But the rest of us, well, we stayed. For we are Bertrand, and Bertrand is us. And it's all we know in this world. We're all still wounded. Some of us pretty deep. But I suppose nothing can heal old scars like the familiarity and comfort of home. It all started in July of 1968. It was a bad time for America, but a good time for Bertrand. We were so small and insignificant that we always felt a bit removed from the rest of the country. Still, there were upwards of 400 living here in those days. And children, too. Plenty of children. 3 of them, all under the age of 8, belonged to old Sandra Hill. She was beautiful back then. A bona fide dime. Although I never had told her that. Her husband was the deputy to the town marshal and more gung-ho than any young lawman you ever heard of. And he was also very devoted to his wife, and she to him. And not even the most lustful fellow in town would even think of coming between those two. Anyway, Sandra was friendly in those days with my sweet Irene. God rest her soul. Our only child, Jody, was around the age of the oldest Hill child, and they had frequent play dates. While the children, gallivanted around, Sandra and Irene would sip tea out on the porch in the warm months and talk for hours on end. Irene would come home and ceaselessly regale me with the tales of Wendell and Sandra Hill, which bored me terribly, though I usually made an attempt to at least half listen. But on this particular night, Irene said something I found very interesting indeed.
Say, have you heard of any ice cream trucks around town?
I responded, of course, in the negative. Nobody in Bertrand owned an ice cream truck. Of that, I was sure. And the idea of somebody driving clear out here to peddle frozen treats to our sparse population? That was frankly laughable. Why do you ask?
Well, because little Polly Hill claims that she's seen one driving about. Sandra told me about it just this afternoon. She says Wendell isn't worried, that nobody else has mentioned anything strange, and something about children having imaginations, of course. But she did seem a bit frightened.
I agreed with Wendell that the likelihood of an ice cream truck in Bertrand was low, and that a child's daydream was a far more realistic explanation. But I still felt somewhat uneasy. If there was indeed somebody driving an ice cream truck around without anybody knowing, that could very well mean our children were in danger. We were removed from the world, as I said. We weren't naive. Predators could come to our town as well as any other. This is the first time hearing about it, sweetheart. But I think we should warn Jody again about, not taking things from strangers, just to be safe. Irene agreed, and the two of us walked into Jody's room. It was a short conversation. She hadn't seen an ice cream truck. Of course, she wouldn't take anything from strangers, even if it was something as delicious as ice cream, she said, as she lifted her eyes. Satisfied, we left the matter alone. And there it rested, untouched for almost a week. It was Jody who saw it first. She and I were walking out of the matinee at the town cinema, our local one-screen movie joint. I don't recall what film we saw. We strolled leisurely down the bright, sun-baked street, shielding our eyes with our hands in a funny sort of salute. After a couple of blocks, the crowd from the movie had dissipated. It was just she and I. As we walked and talked, her voice began to trail off. I looked down at her and saw she was peering down a side alley, at the end of which was another road, parallel to the one on which we stood. I asked her what she was looking at.
I thought I saw that ice cream truck you told me about.
There was a slight mystic tone in her voice. Worried and a bit intrigued, I squinted my eyes into the shadowed alley, but I could see no vehicles on the other side. Are you sure? It doesn't look like anything's over... I paused, raising my hand to my forehead. I could suddenly feel a headache coming on, sharp and acute. It felt like it was directly between my eyes, about an inch or two behind my skull. A strange sensation, to be sure, but that's all it was at the time. My daughter asked if I was okay. I responded in the affirmative. As we continued our march down the street, though, the headache grew more and more noticeable. I began to worry a bit. We turned the corner, and I kept my eyes fixated on the ground, focused on the weeds growing from the cracks in the sidewalk until...
Daddy, look! There it is!
I jerked my head upward, and there, approaching us in the road from a distance of approximately 100 yards, was an ice cream truck. My head exploded with pain that seemed to course in waves through every inch of my body. I fell to the ground, trembling, unable to even scream. I saw my daughter through a wall of tears, just standing limply, her head dangling slightly to the side as if in some kind of trance. She seemed utterly unconcerned with me, though I lay writhing beside her shoes on the concrete. Jody!
Alright, there's one.
Exquisite. Sharper and
There's
more real than
hopefully
any I've ever
more.
experienced.
There's
Still,
not.
my first thought was to get her away from the ice cream truck, which I could hear
Spatial
slowly creeping down
world.
the road. Above the
Pride.
bridge, I could hear a melody played in happy chimes. It was Pop Goes the Weasel. I forced myself to turn towards the truck. It was passing right beside us. I could only glance at its side long enough to see a caricature of a man's face, grinning widely on a baby blue background, mouth open and chewing on something, presumably some kind of frozen treat. Something was written in a little half circle below the image, but in my awful state, I couldn't tell what it said. The pain, it was severe beyond words and unrelenting. And I could do nothing but slump, half conscious, onto the curb.
See, charisma will not work on you. It's
Jody was
six,
shaking
but
me fiercely.
it is what it
I
is.
awoke in an instant and scrambled to my feet, grabbing hold of my daughter's wrists with both hands. Jody, the truck. Where's the truck?
What truck?
She was either the world's greatest actress or dead serious. She had no idea what truck I was talking about. The truck! The ice cream truck that was just here. I crouched my face down close to hers to illustrate the gravity of this situation. A dull ache was left in my head where the pain had been. I felt like someone had bored through my tear ducts with an awl.
Ice cream truck. Oh.
A dawning realization mixed with a genuine, confused innocence crept over her face.
Right. I don't know where it went. What happened to you?
I got a headache. Wait, what do you mean you don't know where it went? Didn't you see it go somewhere?
No.
Again, she seemed to almost be in a trance.
Let's go home. We're almost there.
Two days later, Sandra and Irene sat out on our porch, rocking in the cushioned swing and talking so fast it'd make your head spin. Both were wearing sleeveless floral blouses and nursing iced teas, and beads of sweat ran down each of their foreheads. It seemed to be actually hotter than hell outside. My wife called me outside and instructed me to tell Sandra what happened, how Jody and I had seen the ice cream truck. I wasn't keen on spreading such a bizarre tale, but the ladies persisted, so I spilled everything. The headache, the music, the trance-like state of my daughter in the aftermath. Sandra listened intently, at one point spilling a bit of tea down her face during a distracted sip. She dabbed herself with a napkin almost absent-mindedly as she heard, and her eyes never left me. The second I finished speaking, Irene turned her attention to Sandra.
All right, now tell him.
Tell me what? Well, now this didn't sound good. Sandra took a deep breath.
I think our children are in danger. All of them. Polly saw the ice cream truck last week, and you and Jody saw it too. But there's more. Two little boys came walking into Polly's class late yesterday. They were both holding ice cream bars. When the teacher asked them where they'd gotten them and why they were late, they said they were talking to a man named Edward in an ice cream truck.
Jesus Christ. How did you find out about this?
Polly's teacher told me and a couple of the other moms, but it gets worse. Mary Sutherland's daughter, Jacqueline, always has some new imaginary friend, and apparently, the latest friend's name is Edward, and he's an ice cream man. Mary didn't think anything of it until we spoke to the teacher.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean...
Wait,
I glanced over at my wife. She bit her lip, eyes fluttering wildly, nervously around.
last night, I asked all my children if they had recently met or heard of a man named Edward. Polly said no, but I could tell she was lying. Jack refused to answer entirely.
And Victoria? Victoria was the youngest child, scarcely older than 3. Sandra looked down at her lap.
She clapped her hands together and shouted, ice cream, over and over again.
I stood up abruptly. Let's go talk to Jody. Sandra followed behind us. The 3 of us crowded around my only child's door. I gave it a light knock.
Technically service.
She almost immediately opened it, clearly delighted to have company. I stepped into a room where she had a dollhouse and other toys spread out on the floor. She returned to her playthings as I began to question her, as casually as I could. Say, Jody, do you remember that ice cream truck we saw the other day? She glanced up at me briefly, but didn't respond. Within a few seconds, her toys had her attention again. Have you, seen it around since? Again, no response. I wasn't one to push my child to speak when she didn't want to, but I tried one more question. Do you know a man named Edward? Well, at this, she set her toys down and fixated her eyes on mine. She looked, what was it? Surprised? Scared? To this day, that expression, it haunts my dreams, and a good deal of my waking thoughts, too.
You're not supposed to know about him.
I crouched down so my eyes were level with hers. Who is he?
He's the ice cream man. Dad, you're really not supposed to know about him. That's why you made your brain hurt.
She paused for a moment, then added, almost as an afterthought.
He'd be really mad if he heard you asking about him.
Another week went by. I had just gotten home from work and I walked past my daughter's closed bedroom door. I could hear her playing in there, hear her singing, but I couldn't make it out. With a light smile on my face, I pressed my ear against her door to listen. As I did, the words became clear. Penny for a spool of thread, a penny for a needle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel. It was the last time I ever heard my daughter sing. Word gets around a little town like ours, even back then in our heyday. At this point, everyone knew something was wrong. None of the adults besides me had seen anything, though, nor heard the music.
Congrats to all
They
the
simply
people
had
that
to take
won.
the word of practically every child in town that there was an ice cream truck nearby and that it was presumably driven by a
Head
man
straight.
named
I don't know
Tom.
why I've been having a headache the
There
past
was
few
an emergency
nights.
town meeting in which Tommy Bellwether's
But
father
I
lied
think
and
I need to
sheepishly suggested
go rest
that this was
again.
nothing more than an elaborate joke on
rest
the part of
more.
the children. After all, his own son, then 13 years old, hadn't seen anything, nor had any of the youth older than he.
So thank you for the
This
video.
notion was
I hope you
respectfully
enjoy the rest
but
of
firmly
your day
shut
/
down
night,
by
and I hope
citizens
whoever watches this
who
video
found it
has a great
difficult to
time as
believe
well.
that
Thank you,
3
and
years
bye bye.